Alright YouTube, today we're going to be working on installing the CPP disc brakes, 82 C10. This is a Currie Ford 9-inch lug pattern 5x5, and so these little retainer bolts here for the bearing retainer, these are what came with the rear end. These are what came with CPP. Went ahead and went with these because they're a little bit longer, look a little beefier. So this bracket here should be able to just keep using it. The bolts are long enough so I can use the caliper retaining bracket. The instructions say that with some of these rear ends, this little bearing here, sometimes it's flush, sometimes it's sticking out about 1/8 of an inch. That one will go in a little bit more, but it won't sit flush. And so what you have here is this little spacer. It replaces a retainer that would be on like the drum brakes for these trucks. And so just slide that on. And then from there, you gotta find the bracket that goes on to maintain. So you got the bearing retainer, and then you have the bracket that's actually gonna hold the caliper. So this is part of like a bearing retainer spacer, and then there's the actual bearing retainer, which is gonna take the place of this, but I'm probably just gonna leave that on. It won't hurt anything to have it on there. And then there's what will actually hold the calipers and some shims. So as I get to working on all this, I'm just gonna keep updating it, and then I'll make it all into one video. All right, so these are the bearing retainer brackets. And as far as I can tell, they're both kind of universal per side. They're just flat pieces of metal with the same holes cut in them, so no matter what side you mount them on, it's not going to matter. So there's doesn't appear to be a driver's side, passenger side. If at some point I realize I was wrong, I will update, but for now I'm going to work under the operation that they're just the same. So that's how that mounts up. And then you have your caliper bracket that'll mount onto here. That'll mount your caliper. And so I'm gonna keep working forward. I'm gonna get the bolts on here, the nuts on these bolts, get them tightened up, and then start working on the rest of it. All right, so I've got the bearing retainer, the bearing retainer bracket. So this could go on by itself without this, but there's nothing wrong with leaving that on. And then you've got the bearing retainer spacer. So this is the CPP kit, and as I said earlier, if your axle bearing sticks out just a little bit, they want you to reuse this bearing retainer spacer. If it sits flush with the housing, so nothing sticks out, then you don't need to use that at all. In fact, if you used it, it would adjust where your caliper mounts and probably throw it off. CPP sent their own T-bolts, which was nice of them. The only problem was they threw all the hardware for them in with the bag with the hardware to mount the calipers and the caliper bracket, and so they were actually a different thread size, so I had to go through and sort it all out. Not a big deal. Been nice if they just wouldn't have thrown it all in there together. So I'm gonna get this tightened, torques to 47 pounds. Currie, I don't know, I've never dealt with a Ford 9-inch, but it's kind of nice. They've got this hole here so you can roll it around to your different spots and get your torque on, specs down, and then I'm gonna start mounting the bracket after that. So I'll catch you back up. All right, YouTube, got this CPP rear brake on for my Currie Ford 9-inch, and so it was a little trial and error. Basically, this piece here is your axle retaining bearing, plus it's what the caliper bracket attaches to. So that's this right here. So that sits behind here. And in between these two, so you can see this is the caliper bracket. This is the bearing retainer plus a bracket. And then these are shims that go in between them. And so the trial and error came with a couple different shims. It told you to put 2 of the bigger ones, 1 of the medium size, and then there's like a 1/8 one. So I put it on there, and I didn't like the way things were lining up, trying to center it on there. So I ended up going in here and taking out the smaller one. And then after that, it was pretty close, but they give you these little shims here. So just a really small shim, and that one actually goes in between the caliper and the caliper bracket. You can barely see it, it's pretty tiny. But I felt like it gave me enough clearance. There's no drag, you can actually see light through the other side. Feel like it lined up pretty well. Haven't hooked up any hoses or anything yet. Just wanted to get these on so I could try and get my wheels on today, make this thing a roller. So far, everything's fit pretty well. I hadn't had any issues with it, so I'm gonna work on the other side now that I kind of know what to do. I don't see why I can't set that side up the same way as this side and tighten everything down, and off we go. May have to play around with the shims, but either way, I've got plenty of them left, enough to kind of size everything out. But my plan is to put it together exactly like I did this side. So basically, that's what I used out of the kit for my rear end. I hadn't been able to find a lot of videos for this CPP for 9-inch kit, so I'm just kind of winging it. Everything's lining up pretty well, but this is what I used for mine. There's some more shims that it came with that I ended up not needing, as I said. So this is where I'm at. I probably won't do any more videos on this one until I start like hooking up brake lines and stuff, but so far pretty happy with the kit. Time will tell how the brakes are. I know some people have different opinions on CPP, but I figured it's what I would try to get it going, and if I'm unhappy with them, I'll change them out later.